The confetti was falling, the audience was cheering, and Steve Harvey was doing what he did best, making America laugh. But then a small voice from the third row cut through the celebration, like a prayer, whispered in a thunderstorm. The entire studio froze. Steve's smile faded. The cameras kept rolling, but this was no longer television. This was the moment when a game show became something sacred. 11-year-old Timmy Jackson sat between his grandmother's weathered hands, wearing a red polo shirt that was still too big for his small frame. His sandy brown hair was combed neatly to one side, and his eyes, those impossibly bright blue eyes, held something that made everyone who looked at him pause. Not sadness exactly. Something deeper. The kind of quiet strength that only comes from missing someone so much it becomes part of who you are. The Henderson family had just won their third straight game, and Steve was working the crowd with his signature energy. The studio lights cast their familiar warm glow across the polished floors, and everything was exactly as it should be on a Tuesday afternoon, taping at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. The air conditioning hummed quietly, mixing with the distant sound of stagehands preparing for the next segment. It was routine, it was comfortable, it was home for Steve Harvey. But routines have a way of cracking when they meet real life. During the commercial break, while makeup artists touched up Steve's face and producers reviewed the next family's information, something happened in the audience that would change everything. Timmy Jackson stood up from his seat and raised his hand, not frantically, not desperately, but with the kind of patient determination that suggested he'd been thinking about this moment for a very long time. His grandmother, Eleanor Jackson, a 72-year-old woman whose hands told stories of decades spent caring for others, gently tried to guide him back down. "Sit, honey," she whispered, her voice carrying the soft drawl of rural Georgia. "The show's not over yet." But Timmy shook his head. He'd been quiet for too long. When the cameras came back on, Steve was mid-joke with the Henderson family, his timing perfect as always. The audience was laughing, the energy was high, and everything was flowing exactly as it should. But then that small voice carried across the studio with a clarity that seemed impossible. "Mr. Steve Harvey, sir." The laughter didn't stop immediately. A few people in the front rows turned their heads, curious. Steve finished his punchline, but something in his peripheral vision made him pause. He turned toward the audience, shielding his eyes from the stage lights, searching for the source of the interruption. "Mr. Steve Harvey," the voice came again, stronger this time, trembling with the kind of courage that only comes when you have nothing left to lose. "I have something to ask you." That's when everyone saw him. Timmy Jackson, standing on his seat, one hand raised high in the air, like a student desperate to answer a question that had been weighing on his heart for months. The cameras swung toward the audience, and producers in the control room started gesturing frantically, unsure whether to cut away. Steve's professional instincts kicked in first. He'd handled interruptions before, though they were rare. Usually, it was an over-enthusiastic audience member, or someone who'd had a little too much excitement. He approached it with his trademark charm. "Hey there, little man," Steve said, his voice warm but clearly trying to maintain control of the situation. "We're kind of in the middle of something here. Can you hold that thought until after the show?" But Timmy didn't sit down. His grandmother was tugging gently at his shirt, whispering for him to wait. But he shook his head with a determination that surprised everyone watching. "Please, Mr. Steve," Timmy said, and his voice cracked slightly. "My Mima says you're good at answering hard questions, and I got one that's been keeping me up at night." The studio fell completely silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant whisper of someone adjusting a camera position. Steve's smile began to fade, not because he was annoyed, but because something in that 11-year-old's voice carried a weight that transcended entertainment, transcended protocol, transcended everything that normally happened in that studio. Steve looked at his production team, then back at Timmy. The boy was still standing, still waiting, his hands still raised as if he were in a classroom somewhere, And Steve Harvey was the teacher he trusted most in the world. Then Steve Harvey did something that in 40 years of television he'd never done. He handed his microphone to Mr. Henderson, walked down the stage steps, and headed straight into the audience. The studio was no longer a game show set. It had become something else entirely. A sacred space where a child's question mattered more than ratings, where protocol meant nothing compared to the quiet desperation in a young voice. Steve reached Timmy's row, and the audience members moved aside without being asked, creating a path. He stopped directly in front of the boy, and for the first time in the entire taping, Steve Harvey wasn't performing. He wasn't the host. He wasn't the comedian. He was just a man looking down at a child who clearly had something important to say. "What's your name, son?" Steve asked, his voice lower now, stripped of all performance. "Timothy Jackson, sir. But everyone calls me Timmy." "Timmy." Steve repeated the name like he was committing it to memory. "That's a good, strong name. Now, what's this question that's been keeping you up at night?" Timmy glanced at his grandmother, who nodded encouragingly, despite the tears that had begun forming in her eyes. Then he looked back at Steve, and when he spoke, his voice was clear and strong in a way that surprised everyone who heard it. "Mr. Steve, my mama and daddy are soldiers. They're fighting bad guys on the other side of the world, and they've been gone for 7 months now. And I keep wondering," his voice caught slightly but he pushed through, "I keep wondering if they know how proud I am of them, and if they know that I'm being brave while they're being brave, and if they know that every night I look at their pictures and tell them I love them, even though they can't hear me." The silence that followed was deafening. Steve felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with television and everything to do with recognizing a child who was carrying a burden too heavy for small shoulders. And Timmy continued, his voice growing stronger. "I was wondering if maybe, since you're on TV and lots of people watch, if you could help me tell them that their little boy is okay, that Mima takes good care of me, and I'm getting good grades, and I'm not scared anymore because I know they're coming home." Behind the scenes, someone made a decision that defied every network expectation. Keep the cameras rolling. Don't cut away. The world needed to see this. Steve Harvey, the man who had built a career on quick wit and perfect timing, found himself completely speechless. But only for a moment. Because what happened next is why Steve Harvey isn't just a game show host. He's a man who understands that some moments are bigger than entertainment. Steve knelt down, not a quick bend over for the cameras. He got down on both knees on the studio floor, in his perfectly pressed suit, so he could be eye level with this boy who had just shown more courage than most adults ever would. "Timmy," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "first of all, your mama and daddy already know how proud you are. You know how I know that?" Timmy shook his head, his eyes never leaving Steve's face. "Because brave kids come from brave parents. And brave parents don't just raise brave kids. They feel that bravery across oceans, across continents, across anything that tries to separate them from the people they love." Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "You know what we're going to do right now?" "What?" Timmy whispered. "We're going to send your mama and daddy a message. Not just from you, but from everyone in this studio, from everyone watching at home, from everyone who believes that the families of our heroes deserve to know they're not forgotten." Steve stood slowly and turned to address the entire studio, his voice carrying a gravity that transformed the space from entertainment venue to something approaching a church. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve announced, his words reaching every corner of the studio, "we're going to do something different today. We're going to stop this game show and do something more important. We're going to make sure that 2 soldiers serving our country know that their little boy is not just okay. He's extraordinary." The applause that followed wasn't television applause. It was something deeper, something that connected everyone in that studio to their own understanding of sacrifice, of family, of love that transcends distance. But Steve wasn't finished. He walked back to Timmy and, without hesitation, began to remove his suit jacket. The navy blue jacket that had been with him through thousands of shows. wins and losses, celebrations and disappointments. "Timmy," Steve said, draping the jacket over the boy's small shoulders. "This jacket has been with me for every Family Feud I've ever hosted. It's seen families celebrate. It's been part of dreams coming true. It's been blessed by more love than I can count. And today, it's going home with the bravest little soldier I've ever met." Timmy looked up at Steve, the jacket hanging almost to his knees like a robe. And for the first time since he'd stood up, he smiled. Not a polite smile, not a nervous smile, but the radiant, genuine smile of an 11-year-old boy who had just been reminded that he wasn't alone. "Now," Steve continued, turning to the audience, "I want everyone in this studio to stand up. Every single person. Because we're going to do something that Timmy's parents are going to see, and they're going to know that their son has an entire country behind him." 300 people rose to their feet without hesitation. Not because they were prompted, not because a producer signaled them, but because they couldn't stay seated. The Henderson family abandoned their podium and walked into the audience. The Rodriguez family, waiting to compete next, joined them. Production assistants, camera operators, even the security guards. Everyone was standing. Steve raised his voice so it would carry clearly to the cameras. "Staff Sergeant Maria Jackson and Sergeant First Class David Jackson. Wherever you are, whatever time it is where you're serving, this message is for you. Your son Timothy is not just surviving while you're gone. He's thriving, he's brave, he's kind, he's everything you raised him to be. And this entire studio, this entire country wants you to know that we've got his back until you get home." The camera captured every face in that moment. Tears streaming down cheeks, hands over hearts. People who had come for entertainment and found themselves part of something much more significant. But Timmy wasn't done. He took Steve's microphone and, in a voice that seemed impossible for someone so young, spoke directly to the camera. "Mama, Daddy, if you're watching this, I want you to know that I think about you every day. I know you're fighting to keep us safe, and I'm fighting to make you proud. Mima taught me that heroes come in all sizes, and that sometimes the biggest heroes are the ones who keep going when they want to stop. I love you both so much, and I can't wait to give you the biggest hug in the world when you come home." The studio erupted in applause, but it was mixed with something else. The sound of 300 people crying openly, unashamed of their emotions, connected by the simple truth that love doesn't know borders, and courage doesn't have an age limit. When the episode finally aired 3 months later, it became the highest-rated Family Feud episode in television history. Not because of the game, but because viewers recognized something authentic, in a world that often felt manufactured. 6 months later, when Staff Sergeant Maria Jackson and Sergeant First Class David Jackson returned from their deployment, the first thing they did after hugging their son was call Steve Harvey. Not through his publicist, not through his agent, but through the personal number he had given Timmy that day. The jacket still hangs in Timmy's closet, carefully preserved, and every Veterans Day, the Jackson family gets together to watch the recording of that episode, not as entertainment, but as a reminder of the day when a game show became a bridge across the world, connecting the little boy's heart to his parents' courage. Steve Harvey later said in interviews that Timmy taught him something he'd never fully understood. Sometimes the most important questions aren't the ones on the board. Sometimes they're the ones that come from the heart of a child who's missing his heroes. That Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta proved that when a child's love meets a man's compassion, magic happens. Not the manufactured magic of television, but the real magic of human connection that reminds us all what truly matters. Because some moments aren't about points or prizes. They're about showing up, speaking up, and lifting up the people who need to know they're not alone. And sometimes, that's the most powerful answer of all. Visual prompt for AI image generation. Ultra-realistic 8K cinematic wide-angle high shot inside the Family Feud television studio, captured from elevated distant perspective, showing the full stage setup, In the center back of the stage, positioned in the far middle ground, an 11-year-old boy with sandy brown hair, wearing a red polo shirt, and Steve Harvey, African-American black male, late 50s, completely bald head, thick dark mustache, dark skin tone, wearing a charcoal gray suit with white shirt and patterned tie, are embracing each other. Both are visibly crying with tears streaming down their faces, looking downward in an intimate emotional moment, not facing the camera directly. Steve is kneeling down to the child's level, while they share this profound moment. Rich warm brown color palette dominates the scene. Deep mahogany stage flooring, chocolate brown audience seating, bronze and amber lighting fixtures. Minimal use of blue, yellow, or white tones. Only subtle accents where necessary. Background layers clearly visible. Musicians with instruments on the left side of the stage. Contestants and their families positioned on the right side podiums. Multiple rows of engaged audience members filling the studio seats, all captured in the wide shot. The Family Feud logo visible, but not dominant in the composition. Warm golden brown key lighting from above creates depth. Rich coffee-colored shadows add dimension. The wide-angle perspective captures the entire studio environment, while keeping Steve and the young boy as the emotional focal point in the center. Deep brown color grading, emotional realism, professional television aesthetic. 8K ultra-detailed wide composition, capturing the full scope of the studio while highlighting the intimate human moment in the center.